going to do it on
We're
Facebook.
recording. We're live. Yes, we're recording.
Perfect.
Okay, good morning. Sorry for all of those technical difficulties. Thank you very much for Chinadu and Jennifer for connecting with us live at this event. Of course, I am recording this and I have a presentation. So if there is any other questions and you don't have time to watch this morning, that's okay. You can watch the presentation and come back to me with any questions. So I'm going to share my screen. And you're going to see, hopefully, this presentation. Can you see that?
It's coming.
It's coming. Yes.
There it is.
Perfect.
Okay, so starting a business in France. This is what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, those who do not know me, I always presume you do because I very often for people at these events. But yes, my name is Katriona Murray-Platon. I am a financial advisor for the Spectrum IFA Group. I am the treasurer for the BBN. I have lived in France since 2003. I have I have a law degree from the University of Nottingham-Trent, a master's in international law and a master's in business and tax law. I have started 2 businesses, one in translation and one in financial advice, which is my current business. And I worked for over 8 years as a legal advisor specializing in company law, 4 years of which was in an accountancy firm. So those are basically my credentials and the reason I am talking to you today about what is a business in France, how you start a business in France, and where you might want your business to go. I'm just going to caveat what I'm saying, that I am a financial advisor and I am authorized to give certain financial advice, but the information given today in this presentation is based on information you can find on official government websites and my own personal experience. It should not be considered as official tax advice. And whilst being a micro-entrepreneur does not require the services of an accountant, you may wish to acquire the services of a hand-holding service or virtual assistant, of which there are a couple in our group, to set up your company. For other company structures, you must consult a chartered accountant. So what is starting a business in France? So it sounds like a great idea. Most of us will start off with the micro-entrepreneur business. That means that we are starting it. It's a good way to start up. You either start and go straight to see an accountant and you want to start in a limited company, or you want to begin to your business as an auto-entrepreneur or micro-entrepreneur. You can do this as your main activity or your side activity. If you are a salaried worker, you can have a business on the side. However, you will need the authorization from your employer. There are different types of businesses, whether it be sales of goods, import-exports, artists, freelancers, liberals, and it's what we call the simplified regime, i.e. you don't need to have an accountant. Your tax obligations are a lot more simplified, your social charges, and your, so simplified tax, simplified social regime. Okay. Oh, yeah. Why did not come to, there we go. Okay, so the micro regime means that there is a earning threshold. The earning threshold is 176,200 euros gross maximum for activities such as sales of goods, restaurants, and accommodation. There is a 72,600 euros gross maximum for services in BIC or BNC, BIC being Bénéfice Industriel Commercial and BNC, Bénéfice Non-Commercial. So BIC is services in the commercial sector. BNC is more intellectual, so teaching, translation, financial advice. You can also have a mixed business where part of your business might be selling a product, for example, and another part of your business might be providing advice onto how to make that product work, or you might be having two areas that you're an expert in. So you might be a teacher on the side, for example. It's no harm in having a little side business whilst you're boosting your main business, and so you would declare that under separate house BNC or BIC. Equally, within the same tax household, if you and your partner have different tax regimes, you're allowed to have you're allowed to have both activities going on at the same time, and that essentially doubles the amount of income you're allowed to bring in without you going over the thresholds. Remember, when I'm talking about the threshold, I'm talking about simplified micro regime, no need for an accountant. Main points you need to know, like I said, benefits. BIC is an industrial and commercial revenue. BNC is non-commercial revenue, so essentially intellectual, anything that involves giving your advice, brain basically, as opposed to physical. There are very minimal accounting requirements. That doesn't mean there are no accounting requirements. You should be able to have some kind of accounting system where you can, where you do your own invoices, whether maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet, maybe you have a special app, maybe it's just a pen and paper, a notebook somewhere that details what's coming in and what's going out. For the BIC, this is taxed after a 50% tax abatement, and for BNC there's a 34% tax abatement. So that means that whilst you should be practicing keeping your receipts and understanding your costs and keeping an eye on your own costs and training yourself basically to be your own accountant, if you want to remain under the minimum threshold and you want to remain an entrepreneur, that's absolutely fine and you can do that. But if one day you want to take it to the next level, I think it's always good to practice making sure that you keep receipts, that you know that when you go to a restaurant you ask for a receipt, that you make sure you run things through your business account rather than your personal. Certainly never do it through your personal account, but make sure you treat your business account as your business account and put everything through that. Yeah, that will help you eventually when you come to see an accountant. So it's not, you can't run all costs, and that's the other reason that you want to keep an eye on your costs, because if ever you realize that your costs are going above those abatements, you would want to make sure that that's an indicator that you need to take it to the next level and you need to see an accountant. But if your costs are below those abatements, then that's fine, and it is a 34% abatement for BNC, a 50% abatement. So you're basically essentially only taxed at 50% of your income or 66% of your income of your BNC. And if your expenses go further than that, then you need to speak to an accountant. If you're doing furnished lodgings, furnished lodging is considered as a BIC activity, or if it is classed, that means that you have, this does not mean that you've got, say like a Gîte de France rating or an Airbnb rating. It's not a rating, it's actually an administrative classification with an administrative document carried out by an administrative authority. Gîte de France is approved as one of those organizations who can perhaps carry out the inspection. But once you've got that certificate, that basically means that if you're running a furnished lodgings business, you have a 71% abatement, irrespective of whether you use those costs or not, but you are only taxed on 29% of your gross income, which is very good. There's only certain things are certain in life, and one of them being death and taxes, we always say in the business. And in France, that's taxes and social charges. There are various taxes to pay in France, depending on, again, your setup. We all have to pay income tax, whether we are business owners or whether we are receiving maybe a salary from our limited company. So everyone has to pay income tax and social charges. And also as business owners, we pay cotisation foncière des entreprises after the first year of business, and that is paid at the end of the year. And you may also be subject to VAT, so you should be aware that you have to do VAT returns. So as I was talking about the limits that allow you to remain as a micro entrepreneur, bear in mind that if you are VAT registered, you will be subject to different VAT thresholds, and after that you may not. You may remain a micro entrepreneur, but you will still have to do VAT returns, and that's when you need to see an accountant. Which regime, how you structure your business is also going to be subject to income tax, your income tax bands, and social charges you pay. As a micro entrepreneur, it is seen as a transparent activity, so we are not subject to corporation tax or company tax. We are taxed directly, so anything we make is considered our direct income. And as I said, after the abatement. But if you are, as I said again, if you have already, if your expenses are higher than those abatements, then you are probably paying too much tax. So that's where you need to look at that and speak to an accountant. We talked about it being micro-social. That means that our social charges, our social contributions are it's a simplified regime. It's easy to understand. They're based on your actual gross turnover. You can declare them quarterly or monthly. There's no other declarations to do, which compared to limited companies, they do have separate declarations to do. France loves paperwork. These are your social security contributions. So whilst people grumble about social contributions, social prélèvements sociaux, social charges, and URSSAF, who not the most favorite institution in the world, you do have to see these as, yes, they are, some of them are taxes and contributing to France as a society, the society that we live in and where the roads that we drive on, and so it's the income tax and the social charges that help contribute to that. But also these are contributive social charges. So these actually entitle us to very good pensions, unemployment benefit, healthcare. So there's those kind of social charges. So there's no way around them. They have to be paid, but they are also sort of paid to you and for the society we live in. And it's a maximum of 22%. So that's why it's easy to understand. There's no surprises there. It's 22% every quarter, every month. So when we talk about the abatement, if you think about it, that you've got 22% social charges, 34% abatement on a BNC, or 50% abatement on BIC. And so within that is your social charges, and the rest is your other costs, expenses, travel, those kind of things, admin. So whilst you remain underneath those thresholds, you are a micro entrepreneur. Okay. When you go over those thresholds, then you become an entreprise individuelle. So you've not created a separate entity from yourself. Like I said, it's what they call a transparent entity. You are, what you receive in the company is subject to income tax. However, when you create an entreprise individuelle, you can start running a costs basis. So anything that goes through the company, everything goes through the company, and then you are only taxed on your net turnover. So, and then there's different, again, this is, you can remain an entreprise individuelle and earn, you know, still huge sums of money, but it means that you are the company. There is no separate entity. When you go on to creating an SARL or an SAS, you are essentially creating another entity that is separate from you. Another thing that is possible is to do an entreprise individuelle à responsabilité limitée. And the reason people do that is that their creditors, i.e. notably the tax office and the banks, could come after your personal assets, including your home. So in order to do an entreprise individuelle à responsabilité limitée, you are saying my business assets are only my computer, my books, my da-da-da-da-da. And everything else is my private assets, and no, you can't come and get them, even if I default on payments. So these are the thresholds for the micro-entrepreneur. So we have a régime simplifié, a régime réel. So we talk about régime réel, which are basically, we're talking about cost basis. So there's a simplified version, which is a maximum of all turnover that's under 118,000 euros for sales and letting activity, and 247,000 euros for services. That's why it's, you know, quite a lot of flexibility for freelancers and consultants. And then there's the régime réel normal, again, under those thresholds. But as always, as I said, be aware of the VAT thresholds, because even in the micro entrepreneur, if you go above those thresholds, which is 34,400 for freelance and services and 85,800 for sales and finished lettings, you will have to consult an accountant and get them to do your VAT returns. So limiting liability, I explain why you would limit liability, is to prevent creditors coming after your personal assets. So you can do that by an EIRL. you can do an EURL. So an EURL is a separate entity. It is a company distinct from you. And that is where the company would be paying you a salary. Under an EURL, you might not be receiving a salary, but under an EURL, all costs go through the company, including an accounting cost, sorry. So, and you would therefore receive a salary. So that's where you have to look with an EURL, an SARL, an SAS or SASU. You need to think about so if the company makes a profit, then that profit is subject to corporation tax and impôt sur les sociétés. And then you personally are subject to your own income tax on your managers, your gérants' remuneration. And so you need to look, again, sit down with an accountant to decide exactly which is the most tax efficient option and how much are you paying in both tax and social charges. Because again, for an EURL or an SAS or an SARL, then you've got social obligations as an employer. So they'll be higher than what we were talking about, the simplified regime under the micro-entrepreneur. So EURL and SARL are both limited companies. They have low share capital. They are limited in liability only to their share capital. They usually, there's a certain prescribed way of the way that the Articles of Association are written, what it can and can't do, the way it operates. It's in a structure that existed for many years. So SARL, there's more than one associate, so there's more than one shareholder, so that could be you and your husband, or you and somebody else. And an EURL, it means that you are your sole manager. It's just you and the company. There is no other shareholder, so it's an individual shareholder company. Same thing, SAS. An SAS is actually a lot more flexible. The manager of an SARL is called a gérant. The manager of an SAS is called a president. There was different healthcare regimes. I'm not sure whether that's still the case because we've all gone into CPAM, even as independents, but an SAS is a lot more flexible. So whereas an SARL has very prescribed rules about when the board meets and how it's supposed to, what decisions it makes and what decisions have to be made by a board meeting as opposed to just the meeting of the sole associate, the sole shareholder, which would be an EURL. When you've got an SARL, you've actually got to have a board meeting. Now that can be two of you having a coffee and saying, oh, by the way, our company, yes, okay, well, that's a board meeting. Or it can be, we'll have a board meeting that Tuesday at 5 o'clock and that's what we'll do. SAS is a lot more flexible. You can create all kinds of rules. You can create subcommittees and, you know, the bigger the company is, the more that you're going to have checks and balances. You're going to have committees in there, but an SAS is very flexible as to how you want to do it. And then a SASU just means that there's only one shareholder rather than more than one. Companies are caught, so don't just dive in. If you've not created your business yet and you're arriving in France, like, I'm going to create a company, well, fantastic, but it's a lot of paperwork. People come here from places like the UK where you can get a limited company sort of off the shelf with very minimum accountancy requirements. I was a jurist, I was a lawyer inside an accountancy company, and accountancy companies always have a legal department because everything that a business owner does has to be documented. And there's a lot of paperwork. And so if you dive in and create an SARL or an EURL straight away, and then decide that that doesn't actually work for you, or that you could operate under one of the more simplified regimes or as an entreprise individuelle, then it's very expensive to create, and then it can be also very expensive to dissolve. So before you dive in, make sure you get advice and weigh out your options and see what works best. And as I said, the best person to talk to is an accountant. If your costs are greater than the abatement, then you should go for the réelle option, as I spoke about earlier. You would have to appoint an accountant, but then you can deduct your accountancy costs from your gross income, and then that will reduce what your taxable profit will be. And the micro-entrepreneur, actually the micro-entreprise is actually quite easy when you get the hang of it. Like I said, it's quarterly or monthly declarations, 22% social charges, and then at the end of the year, or maximum 22% social charges, and then at the end of the year, you know what you've done your quarterly declarations, your income is there, pop that in the tax return, and then that's what you get taxed on. So when I started out, I thought, having been a salaried worker, that this was going to be complicated and it wasn't going to be beneficial. But actually, very quickly, I realized that it's very easy to do, very easy to run. And even if your French isn't great, then you'll very soon get the hang of it. So so that's me done within the timing, I hope. And if you have any questions, these are my details. So feel free to contact me. So ladies, what are your thoughts about this?
For you that's not here, you can contact Katriona. We are going to have a discussion with her, and good luck. And we hope you decide whatever you decide to do, you can still contact us on BBN. Allez, have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, Katriona. That was for the life. You know, with the when you talk about the SRL,
It's a mouthful.
Sal, my kids keep helping me with my R. I have always had a problem with R.
I know.
Yeah, so it's whenever you hear me speaking and my R is not pronounced, it is not intentional. But it has always been something that I have been looking at because of my cost. And you know, this, like last year was a mess, so I am not talking about last year, but I've always thought about, if I go above the threshold, how easy is it to move on to the next, like EURL, if I do exceed that 70,000?
Okay, yes, sorry, something I probably should have specified. If you go over the threshold 2 years consecutively, then you will have to speak to an accountant. So there is a tolerance, they tolerate. So if in the first year you make over 70,000 or whatever your threshold is, and suddenly you realize that you don't need to panic basically in that first year. Okay. After that, if you do it consecutively, then you know by that point, you know your business is doing very well, and it's perhaps a good idea to start talking to an accountant about what is the best scheme for you. Okay. And they will explain again how you structure yourself, whether you do an entreprise individuelle or whether you do an SARL. That is really something that's very individual to you. And they will explain also what your social charges obligations are going to be, and whether you can take an income from that structure, how much income.
Does it increase really? Is there much difference in the payment
in terms of the accountancy costs?
No, your tax, does it increase that much?
Yes, because like I said, you've got to consider that if you're creating a company, you will be paying company tax. And if you are remaining as an entreprise individuelle, then you're only just paying income tax. But the social charges can increase. I think roughly under the micro scheme, you're paying like 22% social charges, and under the entreprise individuelle, it can be something like 40% social charges. So it's quite significant, but it shouldn't make you afraid. It should, you should trust that your business is growing and this is natural and normal. And there's lots of people out there with SARLs and SASUs and that you're ready for the next step, basically, and speak to an accountant about this. And it may seem challenging to begin with, but again, like everything, it was challenging when you started your business, but once you've once you get going, then that business will flourish.
Okay, Jennifer?
I was just noticing they have increased in the last few years your gross max under the auto entrepreneur, right?
Yes, they have. It used to be something like 30,000 maximum income, and now it's like 70,000. So that's huge.
Right. That's what I was noticing, because I set mine. I mean, mine's been set up for 5 years now, but I knew that they had talked about upping it. I hadn't followed that. So for me, that's good to hear, because that I know I was sort of at that cusp, the low end, but it's good that it's still it's almost, I mean, it's more than doubled.
Yes.
Exactly.
The
I think
second-
70,000 is a good amount. I
Right.
mean, if you're earning 5,000 every month, that is something that you don't have to pay so much tax on.
Yes,
Right.
those thresholds were increased last year in 2020. It's just a question of organizing. You should remember that if you're declaring quarterly, like for example, we finished declaring for 2020 in December. We declared it had to be declared by the end of January 2021, and the payment came out on the 3rd or 4th of February. So if you earn a lot of money at the beginning of the quarter, say in January now, then you will be paying social charges on that in April, end of 31st of March, and then in early May on that. So you've got the quarter closes on 31st of March, and you've got until the end of April to declare, and then you will pay it in May. So you've got to have that money sitting in your bank account and allocated to that, and then you'll be fine. As long as you're because the temptation is that we get some money in and that we spend that money, and
and we haven't paid the tax.
The tax we will pay later, the tax we will pay next year, but it's the social charges. It's very tempting when we get that money, and we need that money because we need that to further our business, and is to spend it. But you should always remember to keep money in your business account, knowing that you will have those social charges to pay.
So what about now? Like, if somebody like me, I'm not earning money right now because of my business.
I know that very well right now.
Yeah, I'm not earning money right now because of my business, but I want to invest in the business. I want to pay like a promotional video. I want to do some, something to help with the future of the business. Do I have to put that down on the cost and add it to my accounting?
Yes, I mean, if you are in the business already and you have a cost, everything has to be run through the business. Otherwise, you're going to just be paying on stuff that you're being taxed on your net income. So you really need to make sure that everything runs through the business, and you are your business. That's another point. Thank you. I wanted to point out is that you should be channeling some of that money that you're earning back into yourself, and thinking about what would benefit you as a person and what would ultimately benefit your business. So if it's a question of little upgrades, like upgrading your computer, or maybe outsourcing a bit of your work to a virtual assistant so that they can help you out with some admin, or maybe doing a course that would help you get better in a particular area of business that you're finding frustrating, then those are the kind of things that you could be thinking about, or diversifying, or setting up a Zoom account, or whatever it is. Many members of BBN we've all had to adapt to last year and the beginning of this year. We've all had to adapt our businesses, and some very successfully, whether it's restaurants doing takeaways or people doing online Zoom classes. I'm really pleased to see how the end of last year has worked out with many of our BBN members having survived.
We're survivors.
Now, but I have a question, Kate.
Sure.
Under the micro entrepreneur, we cannot declare any costs, or
no.
No,
it's a 34% abatement or 50% abatement, irrespective of whether you actually had those costs or not.
Okay, because I was always under the impression that you couldn't really write off anything because of the abatement that was already built in.
Yes, but if you find that your costs are systematically going over that threshold, then you need to speak to an accountant. And I say systematically, so it's, if you started your business, or you started your business 2 or 3 years ago, maybe it's time just to test the waters and see what's going on, and whether maybe if it is a test then try it out and see what regime works for you and what it's like doing those declarations. If you're coming to France with an existing business from another country and you already have that client base and you know you're going to be going way over those thresholds, or that you already have exceed those costs, then go straight in and speak to an accountant, and they will be able to advise you as to how best to structure your business for you.
Katriona, do you have a list of accountants that you can add to after this meeting? Because we have just 2 minutes, but we can go back. We can get off this call and start another one. Just because there's just 3 of us, that is possible. But is it possible if you have like a list of accountants that you can list it on the group? And of course, if there's any member of the group that is an accountant when it comes to French law and knowing what to do, I think it would be nice if we do a post and encourage people who are in this business to promote themselves or to post something about their business.
Well, I know the companies that I've worked for, so that would be, well, I worked for Cabinet Henderson for nearly 4.5 years, and I also, one of my colleagues from Cabinet Henderson who came to an event, Michael Vernon, he now works for Mazars. So Claudia Fenot, who came to our event, and Michael Vernon, who came to the event. Michael now works for Mazars. Claudia works for Cabinet Henderson. I can put their details in, but if anybody else knows of anybody in the area who's good, who speaks English, then absolutely, we definitely want to know about it, because it's going to be very important for our members, and it's always nice to have recommendations from people. Be recommended good people to work with us. So. Looks like we
Jennifer, who are you using? Are you using anybody?
No, I've been very simple under the my micro.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, guys.